Hey guys, welcome to today's class. Have fun.
Hello guys, today we'll be looking at non-African poetry where we look at two poems, The Pulley by George Herbert and The Schoolboy by William Blake. And so we'll look into the summary, the plot analysis, and look into some of the plot devices used in these two poems. So now starting with The Pulley by George Herbert, I'm going to read the poem for you. It has 4 stanzas. So I'm going to read the poem for you. Stars. The first stanza goes thus. When God at first made man, having a glass of blessing standing by, let us, said he, pour on him all we can. Let the world's riches, which dispersed lie, contrast into a span. So strength first made way, then beauty flowed, then wisdom, honor, and pleasure. When almost all was out, God made a stay, perceiving that alone of all his treasure rest in the bottom lay. For if I should, said he, bestow this jewel also on my creator, he would adore my gift instead of me, and rest in nature, not the God of nature. So should both losers be. Yet let him keep the rest, but keep them with repining restlessness. Let him be rich and weary, that at least if goodness lead him not, yet weariness may toss him to my breast. So that is basically what the Pulley. So those are the 4 stanzas of the Pulley by George Herbert. So now who's George Herbert? A quick look into the poet's background. He was born on the 3rd of April 1593 and died on the 1st of March 1633. He was a Welsh-born poet, orator, and a priest of Church of England. So Herbert's poetry or poems are oftentimes known as experimental poems that are written out of his passionate emotions and likeness for God, Christianity, belief, and faith, and all sort of things like that. So now, with the poet's background done, we'll move to the poem summary. From what I read out to you, from the 4 stanza in the poem that I just read out to you, it's quite clear that the Pulley is trying to talk to us about God and how God relates with human beings or man as used in the poem, yeah? So it's basically talking about how or looking into the relationship between God and man. So the Pulley basically focuses on the relationship between God and man. So the poem, or I'd rather say the poet now, uses the word Pulley to elaborate on man's dependence on God. So this is how it works. It talks about, in the first stanza, it talks about how God created man like we saw in the Bible, yeah? If you read the Bible, you know Genesis 1 to 2 was all about how God created man and the world, yeah? So that was what the first stanza of the Pulley was talking about. Talked about how God created man, how God blessed man with riches. And later on, he looked into how God decided to bless man with even more things than wealth or material things, blessing man with strength, pleasure, honor, wealth, and all those other things like addition. But then again, after all of this that God has done for man, it still withheld some things. So God did not give man all of the things man is going to need. So that is why you know that as human beings, you can't have everything. Like, even if you're happy, even if everything seems to be going well for you, even if it seems like there's no problem, but there's just always one thing that brings you back to God, or like that creates like that curiosity or questioning, and that will eventually lead you back to your creator. So that is what George Herbert was trying to say in the Pulley. So it's saying, regardless of all the things that God has done, how beautiful God has made the world look, how God has given man almost everything they think they would need, there's just one thing that will always bring man back to God. So that is what the pulley refers to. So regardless of how much man feels like they're independent, there's always one thing that brings them back to God, and that is the whole essence of the pulley. And from the summary which I've given you in the slide here, you'd see that I totally talked about how God has given man everything man needs, but then there's just always one thing to make man believe or bring man back to God, the Creator. So now we'll move on to explanation and analysis of the stanza. I'll start with the stanza 1. Well, this stanza looks into or talks more on the creation of man, creation of the world, what God did for man, how God gave man wealth, riches, strength, honor, and family, all of those things that God gave man at the time of creation. So that is what the first stanza talked about, looked into how God created man and how he made everything beautiful for man. So now moving on, the second stanza elaborates more on the relationship between God and man by saying after God created man, after God created the world, after God created all these beautiful things, he thought of it that, probably this is not enough. I can add more to what I've given to this, my creations. Yeah? So God thought of giving man more things than they have before. So that is what the second stanza elaborated more on. So now moving on to the third stanza, we looked into how God has now made a decision when he said that when a particular line says that I'll take you back to the stanza 3, which says that he would adore my gift instead of me and rest in nature and not the God of nature. So basically what this is all trying to tell us is that God is being very careful of giving man everything they want, because it feels like when man has every single thing they desire and want, then they wouldn't need God, and they wouldn't learn to depend or go back to God, who is actually the creator of everything. So basically that is what this third stanza is saying. It's talking about the pulley, like saying regardless of everything you have, there's still something that draws you back to God. So that's what this third stanza is about. Now moving on to the fourth stanza, which kind of like encapsulates everything. So it's like it kind of like I wouldn't say summarize, but it's just like hits it in the head, where it talks about how God always creates, there's like this void that is always in every man, and how God is the only one that can fill the void. So by giving man everything they need, by giving them wealth, riches, family, good life, strength, perseverance, and so many other things that man would possibly need, but holding back on one thing that will always bring them back to God is just trying to let us understand the whole concept of the pulley, as the title states. Yeah, so that is what this fourth stanza is talking about. It's trying to help you understand that in the end, with the way that we understand that God loves us, God has given man everything man needs, but there's just this need for man to always remember that this is not by your doing, this is by God's doing, and you would always need to give credit and go back to God for whatever you've done or whatever happens. So now with that being explained, we'll move on to the themes in the poem. The first one is God's superiority. So the whole, I would say this theme is quite prominent in all of the stanza in the poem, because we also about how God created man, how God gave man everything man needs, and how God withholds or how God holds back on one thing that always brings man back to God. Yeah, so that all shows the dominance, the superiority of God in man's life. The next one is frailty of the human mind. So this is just saying that regardless of everything that God gives us, there's still one thing that's missing, and that one thing will always bring us back to God. Yeah. So the third one is man dependence on God. This is clearly expressed all through the poem. Talks about how God gives man everything, but there's always just one thing that brings man back to God. The first one is the reason for man's restlessness. So the reason why, regardless of how you'd see somebody who looks so comfortable, you see some people and you feel like, this person has all the things they would probably need. Yeah? And then you still see the person still struggling. And you're like, why are you struggling? You literally have everything you need. But then the reason for that struggle, the reason why man cannot just be relaxed and feel comfortable is because of the one thing that is always missing, and that is one thing that man always have to seek from God. Yeah. The fifth point is the agape love, which is unconditional love from God to man. So with all of these things, it also shows us that God loves us so much that He has given us life. He's given us a lot of things to live this life. So God has given you life, He's given you family, He's given you wealth, and He's giving you so many opportunities that will come your way all through your lifetime. So all of those things are just to say that God loves us so much, but He's also trying to be cautious because He knows in a way that human beings can go uncontrollable. So a way to control humans is by holding one thing back and helping them say, okay, with everything you have, you still have to come back to me, your creator. So that is what this theme is all about. And that is all on the themes in the poem, The Pulley. The next one is the moods and tones of the poem. We'll quite notice that the poem is quite reflective. It's reflecting about existence, it's reflecting about humans' relationship with God and how the whole life works. So as we can see, it's quite clear that this whole poem is just a reflection of the biblical creation story of how God created man and how man is supposed to live and communicate and maintain and have a relationship with God throughout his lifetime. Yeah, so that is the mood and tone of this poem. The next one is to quickly look at the poetic devices. We have alliteration. I spoke about this the last time we talked on the last non-African poem. Alliteration is just a repetition of identical consonant sounds, and we have a lot of them in this poem. If you look into the stanza or the lines, I'm sure you'll find out more examples. I've given you 2 examples here, but I'm very sure if you look into some of the lines, you'll find more examples. The second one is assonance, which is the resemblance of sounds or like vowels in the poem. I've given you 2 examples again, but I'm sure you can always relax and look into the lines and find more examples of assonance. The third one is personification. This occurs when a thing or abstraction is represented as a person. So I gave you an example of how he said a glass of blessing standing by. How does a glass is like an abstract, it's not living, but standing by is just ascribing it to characteristics of human being. The next one is so strength first made a way. Yeah, so those are the 2 examples. But I'm really pretty sure that if you look into this poem more, you would find out more examples of personification in the poem. So I also listed out some other poetic devices like consonants, imagery, synecdoche, and some other ones that I'm pretty sure if you look into this poem properly, you'll find out more and get more examples that will be quite useful for you. And that is all on the Pulley. Yeah, so basically the idea from reading the lines shows or lets you understand that this poem is all about the relationship between man and God, how there's this constant dependence on God from man, because God provides man with everything, but there's always one thing that man has to always go back to God for. So basically, because of that one thing, man has to always remember and go back to his creator. Yeah? So that is all on the Pulley. So now we move on to The Schoolboy by William Blake. Again, I'm also going to read out this. This contains 6 stanza. I'm going to read out each of the stanza for you, and then we do the normal routine of doing a poem summary, analysis, the themes, and all. Yeah. So now, starting with the first stanza, it goes thus: I love to rise in a summer morn, when the birds sing on every tree. The distant huntsman winds his horn, and the skylark sings with me. Oh, what sweet company! But to go to school in a summer morn, oh, it drives all the joy away. Under a cruel eye out one, the little ones spend the day in sighing and dismay. Hard then, at times I droop in sit, and spend many an anxious hour, nor in my book can I take delight, nor sit in the learning bower, worn through with the dreary shower. How can the bird that is born for joy sit in a cage and sing? How can a child, when fears annoy, but droop his tender wing and forget his youthful spring? O father and mother, if birds are snipped and blossoms blown away, and if the tender plants are stripped of their joy in the springing day by sorrow and care dismay, how shall the summer arise in joy, or the summer fruits appear? Or how shall we gather what griefs destroy, or bless the mellowing year when the blast of winters appear? So basically, the stanza or the poem I just read out to you is The Schoolboy by William Blake. It's a reflection of the life of a schoolboy, what goes on in the mind of a schoolboy, and the whole activities, and how a child, I wouldn't say this is a reflection of every child's impression of the school, but this is from the author's idea of what goes on in the mind of a child, to letting us understand how they feel about going to school in the morning. But before we will go into the plot summary and doing analysis of each stanza, I'll quickly give you a brief background of the poet. Who is William Blake? He was born 28th of November 1757 and died on the 12th of August 1827. He was an English poet, painter, engraver, and visionary who worked to bring about a change both in social order and in the minds of men. So William Blake wrote this poem, The Schoolboy, to describe and elaborate on the life of children, and particularly the unjust ways in which they are treated by the society. So that is pretty much all we have on the poet's background. So now we do a quick summary of the poem. So The Schoolboy, as I said earlier, focuses on the life of a schoolboy. The narrator, as we see, or as we hear, appears to be a schoolboy who's telling us the story of how he feels so happy waking up in the morning with the sun and the birds singing and the cars on around makes him feel alive. But then when the thought of going to school runs by, it's just, the whole happiness, excitement, and all just goes away for him. And then he has to go through the stress of going to school, having to deal with the stern look of the headmaster, and how boring and how restricting the whole school environment is for him. So with according to the schoolboy, all he has in mind, and with all that goes on in his mind in school, he's not able to read, or he's not even able to study, learn, or assimilate anything that's been passed on to him. And he's crying on to his parents to please find a way out of this so he can enjoy his beautiful morning without having to run about going to school or being caged in a classroom. Yeah, so that is like a quick summary of what this poem was all about, telling us about how a schoolboy narrates how he wakes up in the morning, beautiful morning, but the thought of going to school is just like something they don't want to hear. I can kind of like personally relate with this because I never liked going to school growing up. Yeah, so I feel like this poem kind of like relates with me growing up, because I never liked going to school. I didn't like it. So I can totally relate. I don't know if you can relate with what William Blake has said in this poem, but I can totally relate with him. So he's telling us about how the whole routine, what goes on in the life of a schoolboy, has to go to school in the morning, but he doesn't really want to go. But there's no way out of this because he has to go to school. I mean, there's no way his parents would understand from his point of view why you shouldn't go to school. So I think that's quite enough for the summary of the poem. It's quite well explanatory and it's very clear. I mean, from reading everything, you can dissect, you can understand that, oh, this is what this person is trying to talk about. So now we move on to the explanation and analysis of the stanza. Stanza 1 was just introducing us to the main character, who is the schoolboy, talks about the life of the schoolboy. So from the description of the first stanza makes us understand this schoolboy we're talking about is a nature lover, with the way it describes everything that happens in the morning, the breeze that flows, and the birds singing and all, the sun and the sky. So it makes us understand the schoolboy we're talking about is somebody that loves nature, is somebody that loves life and loves living. But now when we go on to stanza 2, it just helps us understand more that the thought of going to school, when it comes to going to school, it's just like a hell of an idea for him. It just doesn't like the idea. So he loves to wake up in the morning, but when it comes to him going to school, it's just not the right thing for him. So that is what the second stanza is all about. Second stanza was helping us understand how he feels about going to school, how annoying he thinks going to school is all about. The third stanza looks into the day activity of the schoolboy, how he sits in the class, just sits in a corner, sighing, and not really paying attention to anything because he feels like he's caged. So all he thinks about in the classroom is how he can get away from this bondage, which is school. So he doesn't really focus on anything. And the fourth stanza now talks about how he likens the situation to a bird that is meant to sing but has to be in a cage. So he's talking, if we look at it in his angle, looking at how he described the morning in the first stanza, he's somebody that loves life, he loves to live, he loves to enjoy nature. But the thought of going to school just destroys everything for him. So now when he likens that situation to a bird that is meant to sing and fly high in the sky, but has to be caged somewhere, that kind of like reduces the pleasure and the enjoyment that a bird is supposed to have. So just like him, who enjoys life, who enjoys nature, but just can't enjoy those things. Why? Because he has to go to school, he has to be in a class, he has to deal with all the boring lectures and being restricted in a room, all in the name of being in school. So that is what this fourth stanza was talking about, letting us understand that, oh, I'm someone that loves nature, I love to enjoy life, but just the thought of going to school is just not it for me. So that's what this fourth stanza was talking about. Moving on to the fifth stanza, it helps us understand that, oh, okay, this is not what I really want, and it's calling out to his parents to let him stay out of school, or like find an alternative to going to school by trying to use the word birds and being nipped and blossoms that are being blown away. So he's trying to let his parents know how he feels about going to school, how depressing the thought of going to school is for him, and trying to help them understand how unhappy he is to go to school. So that is what this fifth stanza is all about. The sixth stanza is just trying to let us know that a solution, if something is done about all his complaints about how he doesn't want to go to school, how bad or how sad he feels about going to school, if something gets done about this by his parents, then he can enjoy the summer, then he can have his life enjoying the nature which he loves. So that is what this sixth stanza is all about. It's just trying to help us understand that this is how he feels about going to school. He doesn't like to go to school, and he's cried out to his parents, trying to help them understand that this is how he feels about going to school. And then, from the look of things, the child has yet to reach an age in which he truly feels sorrow or despair. His youthful melodramatic appeal will fall on deaf ears. So he fears that all his cries, complaints will eventually fall on deaf ears, as his parents won't take him serious. So basically, that is all about the poem. It's just trying to let us understand how or what happens or what goes on in the mind of the schoolboy. So now, quickly running through the themes prominent in the poem, we have sorrow, we have nature, and we have confinement. Sorrow in the sense that he really, really hates the thought of going to school. Nature, with the way he described the beautiful morning, the birds singing in stanza 1 helps us understand this is a nature lover. But then the confinement part comes in the way where he feels he's being caged and he has to go to school. So that is basically the three prominent themes in the poem. I'm sure there are more. If you look into the poem, I'm really, really sure you'll find more themes in the poem. So now quickly, we look into the poetic devices. We have metaphor, we have alliteration. Metaphor in the part where he said is youthful spring, yeah? And alliteration, I already gave an example of alliteration here, but I'm very pretty sure if you look into the lines, poems again, you'd find more poetic devices. And like I always say, please try to look into these things more once you're done listening to or watching this tutorial. Try to go back and read the poems again, try to understand it, try to dissect it, digest it in your own way, and then try to explain it to yourself. And by doing that, it will help you bring out some of these points, like some of the poetic devices that I didn't include here. I'm pretty sure you find more poetic devices that are included in the poem. And you can also make up your own idea or like your own understanding of each stanza and analyze it in your own way. And don't forget that I always say, if you end up doing this and you feel like you've come up with something that you feel is correct, or you feel like, oh, okay, you found a new poetic device that I didn't talk about, but you think it's closely related to what is being portrayed in the poem, you're free to put in a comment. You can put in a comment and let's talk about some of the things that you found out, and then we can see if it's truly part of the poem or not. Yeah, so basically that is all we have for today's poem. We looked into a quick summary. Yeah, we looked into the Pulley by George Herbert, where he talked about the relationship between man and God, how man depends on God. And then we also looked into The Schoolboy by William Blake, where he talked about the life or what goes on in the mind of the schoolboy. So basically that is all we'll be doing for today. See you next time and have a great, lovely weekend.
I hope the class was interesting. If you have questions, please drop them in the comment section or send us an email. We will love to help you further. See you in the next class.